Welcome back, and thank you to those who've just joined us. This is All Angles on eNCA. Now, the State of the Nation address takes place tomorrow. There's much to look forward to, especially with regards to the energy crisis. The big question, though, is how is President Cyril Ramaphosa going to address this? But there's also been much criticism around whether the SONA should be such a big event, and political analyst Professor Sipho Seepe thinks it's just a costly, infinite deal of nothing. Let's speak to him now virtually. Thank you very much, Prof, for your time here on eNCA. I don't know what your opinion would be about the State of the Nation address, but many South Africans are saying there's no point in even watching because it's a lot of great diagnosis of what the country is going through, which we know. But whenever it comes to the solutions, another year arrives, another State of the Nation arrives with none of those solutions being implemented.
Yeah, I think ideally the State of the Nation address should be a statement on where the country is in terms of its promises, the promises of 1994, and also the promises contained within the Constitution. And those include the issue of addressing the historic inequalities that were spawned by apartheid, to address what the ANC correctly calls the triple challenges of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. But what we have seen in the last few years has been more the deepening of those challenges that we face. Unemployment has grown since President Ramaphosa got into power. There are now 2.7 more million people who have joined the ranks of the unemployed. And there's actually to the notion of saying national state of disaster. It's a shorthand to what has become President Ramaphosa's presidency. And Musimamane put it very nicely that if you look carefully at what President Ramaphosa has given, it has been more promises. And this is something that is said by many people. We've had a lot of commissions, we've had the task teams, but the one thing that the President Ramaphosa is good at is road shows. We've had the investor conference that have brought nothing. So as we speak, we are in a state of disaster, not only in terms of energy. So that is the first thing that we must underscore, that the State of the Nation address should be about whether we as a people are hopeful for the future. But what you get is a general sense of despondency. If you listen to all the political parties, they're actually not even looking forward because they know there'll be again what the opposition leader John Steenhuisen says, a smoke and mirrors in terms of the numbers that we put. The only thing that President Ramaphosa has actually been able to do is when he appeared being excited fixing a pothole. And if you think about the pothole that he was fixing, it stands in contradistinction to the promise of a smart city, promise of bullet trains. Instead, what we saw a president getting into a train that is not functioning. And Busa, when it was still led by people like Sipho Seepe, were saying the most important thing that the president must do is to address the basics. But what we are going to get is more promises. And the energy crisis is almost an indicator of the state of failure by President Ramaphosa.
Prof. Seepe, I don't know if you can see any evidence in the last 5 years or so that the president has delivered a State of the Nation address, any evidence of things being implemented, etc. Some people would say the SIU, at least he signed off a few proclamations when it comes to corruption, etc. Have you seen any evidence that, even a small, slight, example where his promises and his last State of the Nation addresses have been implemented?
Well, we have seen the signing of proclamations, but they have led to nothing. What we've seen is people being hauled before the courts with the promise that the case will start. Instead, what we have seen, we could actually call, has been more the abuse of the court process, the abuse of law enforcement agencies. You cannot have a person being charged and 4 years later, the NPA is not doing anything, and then you call that success. Actually, our constitution requires that everybody has a right to a speedy trial. But what we see here is the violation of people's rights to what you call a speedy trial. But when it comes to the conditions of African people and who are in the majority, the things have become worse. You just have to go to the communities. And you could say the behavior, the daily protest by people in this country, in the majority, in almost every province, every city, is an indication of the state of disaster and the state of a nation. It's a state of despondency and hopelessness. And right now, President Ramaphosa is no longer even talking about the when the energy crisis will be resolved. The last time he spoke about that, he told us that no, we'll be told. That was a shift from where he used to promise that within 18 months, this thing will be an issue of the past. And it needs to be also pointed out that the electricity crisis and load shedding returned once he took over as the president of the country. And at the moment, even what is put on the table as renewables, everybody knows that is not going to work. What we need is energy sufficiency and security that can only be provided when you have a base load that is secure and stable.
Yeah, exactly. And Prof, I just want to bring in another aspect in the few years that Ramaphosa has been at the helm as the president. Some of his supporters would say that we are being too harsh as South Africans because at some point for 2 years we had a pandemic where thousands of people lost their lives, etc. And that also probably set him back a little. Do you agree with this, or is this just a convenient excuse?
Well, it's first dishonest because if you look at the economic indices, they indicate that the collapse of the economy occurred before the pandemic. What the pandemic did was to deepen and exacerbate the conditions of hardship among ordinary people. But to say that he was doing well is the highest form of dishonesty. President Ramaphosa had no idea other than thinking that you can run the country through roadshows, through being engaged in public relations exercises. So far, we can actually say he is a failed president.
Yeah. Prof, I'm also interested in what you think. I mean, we know yesterday when the National Assembly Speaker, Sipho Seepe, mentioned the 8 million rand that it would cost for tomorrow's SONA to actually happen. It also had to do with the fact that they have to be at a different venue because of Parliament still being damaged from last year's fire. But there's also that whole red carpet part of it. Is it necessary, for politicians to be coming there with their wives, bringing different celebrities to this particular event when the country is suffering like this? I mean, are they reading the room properly?
If you consider that all we're going to hear is hot air, and then you look at the expenditure, then you can actually say this is unnecessary. And the ANC and Ramaphosa, when it's convenient, they go virtual. So they could easily have gone virtual for him to tell us what we already know. What the President Ramaphosa is very good at is outlining our challenges, as if doing so means that he's going to solve the problems. Instead, that outlining simply reminds us of the pain that we're going through, but it is not an answer. So the expenditure and the cost, as I said, it's a cost where we're going to be exposed to an infinite deal of nothing.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Sipho Seepe, political analyst there, speaking to us about tomorrow's State of the Nation address by President Cyril Ramaphosa.